Welcome, mountain bikers. It's an every other Wednesday, and that means a new Vital MTB's The Inside Line podcast. The journey of today's guest is inspiring. Joe Graney just happens to be the CEO of Santa Cruz Bicycles, but he never had the goal of being the man in charge of such a highly influential bike brand. The Bostonian just followed his passion for riding bikes, tinkering with bikes, machining, engineering, mix in a little RV life. And lo and behold, after designing some of mountain biking's most popular rigs, he's running the show over at Santa Cruz. Not surprising, however, he's as down-to-earth as the first time I met him some 7 or 8 years ago. I enjoyed getting to know more of Joe's story, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. This Vital MTB Inside Line podcast is brought to you by Jensen USA. Shop for great deals and get professional advice on your favorite mountain bikes, components, and riding gear. Over 2 million happy cyclists served since 1994. Visit jensenusa.com/The Inside Line podcast and use code INSIDELINE for 10% off qualifying items. Maxxis Tires. Where the rubber meets the dirt, Maxxis makes no compromise tires for any rider, any trail, anytime. So, gonna kind of need to be around here talking to it. So Tell me a Roscop story. We'll get the levels going.
Rob Roscop. What is a good Roscop story? We have this picture around here of Rob standing in the parking lot of the cannery, standing over a printer that he'd smashed into pieces with an aluminum bat.
Like Office Space style?
Yeah, like Office Space style. Rob had some anger management issues with electronics back in the day.
And that's it. Thanks for listening to The Inside Line. It's sick. That's awesome. Sure I'm good there. All right. You ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I'll get set up a little bit better here. Can't cheat and see the questions.
Yeah, I just listened to your Hans Ray one the other day, which was awesome. Yeah, because Hans is like a
Hans,
childhood hero of mine, you know?
Felt the same way when I was interviewing. I seriously, I started getting all sweaty and nervous. It's Hans Ray.
Yeah, I mean, same thing. It was funny listening to your comments, about, having the VHS tapes and everything. And I remember there was I think it was in Jamaica or someone where he hopped up a waterfall. And I remember just I was so stoked on it. And I actually remember, I think it was maybe he had said or something. He was the highest paid biker that wasn't a racer, Yeah,
it's
made a lifestyle out of that. And I was that's so rad. Yeah. And the fact that he's still doing it.
He is, for sure. Yeah, and he kind of invented that whole idea with mountain biking. I mean, he said he got it from, the idea from skiing and stuff, but still, he made it work with bikes.
It was so cool. I mean, who else has sponsors that they've had for that long?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really impressive. I mean, he's probably the longest running employee at GT.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, when he talked about swapping over, different bosses come in, they're what do you do here? I'm Hans Ray. So, all right, kick this off. I'm gonna read a little intro and we'll get going. Welcome to Vital MTB's The Inside Line podcast. Our special guest today, none other than hella NorCal legend, Joe Graney. How you doing? Say hi.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming by, Sean.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor to have some time made for this because I know you're a busy person.
Oh, it's great. I mean, this is a nice respite.
Yeah, good. We'll keep it as long as we can so you can avoid work all day.
Perfect.
All right, now it says that you're CEO of Santa Cruz Bikes. Is that some mountain bike acronym? What's that mean?
No, that is the chief flack catcher. But as of I don't know, about a year and a half ago or something, moved into that role.
Okay, well, cool. Well, I can officially say that you are the first CEO on the Inside Line. And
what an honor.
I don't know, unless we're getting Trump next, it's all backwards from here, isn't it? CEO, it's all going to be downhill for who's ever next. So, no, but thanks for your time. And, having known you and been around you a little bit just with various projects over the years, I've always appreciated your candor and kind of your honesty. And so stoked to hear what you have to say, hear what kind of shit talk you can pull today.
I know that you love that.
I'm totally kidding. So, all right. we do this with every podcast, and I think it needs to be done here, but let's get some history. Like, I know a lot of bike nerds know who you are, industry people. Like, yeah, Joe Graney, know who he is, but where were you born? Like, let's start from the beginning, see how you got here.
Yeah, I was born in just north of Boston, Mass. So I'm a Mass hole. And
still hear it in there. It's good.
Yeah. And I kind of grew up around there. I spent 4 years in my life living on the west coast of Ireland, like from when I was 6 till I was 10.
No way, really?
Yeah. My dad. Yeah, my dad just wanted to like move the family over there, just kind of get a new experience. So that was pretty cool. And then when we kind of moved back to the same area and grew up in Woburn, Mass. Kind of after getting into mountain biking and going to mechanical engineering school at Northeastern in Boston, I decided to move out west and get some better weather and better trails.
Okay. So going back a little bit, how did you get into riding bikes? Was it, I know, kind of people of our generation, it was just something you did growing up, I guess, but...
Yeah, I was really into it before I had a license and like BMX, and then I had like a road bike, and it was kind of the way to find freedom as a kid. You can't get around otherwise.
Was it a road bike to you or a 10-speed?
It was a 10-speed.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. And then after kind of getting a license, it fell away. And then, if we're being honest here, after I had my license revoked, I didn't pay a bunch of speeding tickets from having a motorcycle. I couldn't afford them, and I got my license pulled. I kind of just, went back to bikes again at like age of 19 or so. And that was, maybe like somewhere around like maybe 1994, 95. I remember seeing a pair of top line cranks, like purple Anno top lines. And I grew up working in a machine shop. My dad's got a machine shop called JG Machine.
Okay, so some history there, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was looking at these cranks being like, man, I could make these cranks. I wasn't that good of a machinist, but I was like, somebody could. And I sent it to my older brother. I remember he was a machinist, and he was like, dude, that's some good machining on those. But that kind of sparked it for me. That was something that I could kind of do with my life. I was a little lost, and I was just like, kind of a stoner, and I dropped out of a couple of different colleges, and then and I saw those top line. It really was like a purple Anno top line cranks that like sparked it and made me go back to engineering school, and or like go back to school for mechanical engineering to design bike parts.
Okay.
And
do you feel like having the machine shop heritage, like you had the like kind of the know-how of the process and the machinery, and like was it just a matter of getting the details with the engineering and the math, like to go to school?
A little bit. I mean, it really was I was kind of winging it because I knew from being a machinist that engineers are the ones who made the drawings of the parts for the parts that I was machining. And I thought, like, yeah, so if you want to design the parts, you should become an engineer. And I machined several stems and just kind of from scratch, like winging it. I had a couple break on me, like bars come off in your hands kind of thing.
Yeah.
Fortunately, didn't get hurt.
Is this for mountain bikes or BMX back
For
then?
mountain bike.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like quill stems?
No, it was a headset at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Like 1 inch probably. I think it was on a light speed that I had at the time with Mag 21 SL tie fork on it.
So mid-90s, early 90s
Yeah, exactly.
kind of thing? Okay.
Yeah, mid-90s. And and some of the stuff broke, and it just kind of emphasized that, like, you need to figure out how to design stuff that doesn't break. It's kind of what it boiled down to.
When you were at school, did you think about working in the bike industry as the end result?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was all about that. Like, that's what I thought. I mean, I was there to design bikes, so every project I could turn into a bike part, I did. My senior kind of capstone design was designing a fixed gear hub called the Chubb. It's still sold by the Hive.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah. So, yeah.
No way.
It was like a team of 5 of us that, like, we did all the design work on it and kind of proved out that by making a larger diameter flange with a stiff connection, you could decrease spoke stress.
Okay.
So, and I did an internship at Trek during my time at Northeastern. And so...
That's where you went for engineering, Northeastern?
Yeah, at Northeastern.
Yep.
I did an internship at Trek, I think in maybe 96 or 97.
Okay.
Y bike days.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the URT.
Yes.
What did you think about that stuff back then? Did you have opinions on it? We'll get into this, but Brandon Turman calls you the first like real talk mountain bike industry guy, in terms of engineering and stuff. And so we know you're opinionated, but back then, did you have opinions yet? Was it still kind of blossoming and not developed enough to have an opinion?
I mean, I didn't know enough about. I wasn't a good enough rider to have a real suspension opinion at the time. I don't think I worked at a bike shop called International Bicycle Center in Allston, Mass, kind of inside of Boston, and we were a Trek dealer, a Trek and Specialized at the time, and there was a dude that I worked with, Jody Stoddard, who
Oh yeah,
you know Jody?
Well, I was a Grom not a Grom, but in Colorado when I first saw the dual slalom stuff in Denver, and he was racing there, and he was kind of like, "Whoa, there's Jody."
Yeah,
Like, nasty BMX
studs,
pro.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Jody was like the parts department manager at the shop, and we used to ride together all the time, and he rode a Y bike, and Jody's an amazing rider, so it was always like, dude, if he can ride a Y bike, then they must be rad. So yeah, I mean, at Trek, at one point at Trek, I was kind of told toward the end of my internship that I was being a little vocal with my criticism of some stuff that was going on and kind of bringing down some of the morale of the team.
Okay.
And that I was told that that bicycles was a fashion industry and decisions were made by marketing and not by engineering.
Really? Okay. So different time in the sport, but interesting to hear. And like how kind of like, high up on the team were you then? Were you sort of low man?
I was like a long-haired Grom.
Okay.
Obnoxious person. I'm sure that they were like, what the hell is this kid doing here? So yeah, I totally deserved to be told off. But it impacted me. This isn't a slag on Trek. I think the things have come quite a long ways. Like they have some incredible bikes now. I mean, that was in the Y bike days, and they were looking at Specialized, who had just come out with the FSR bikes, and they were trying to decide linkages are cool in suspension, and we don't have a linkage, and maybe we should make a bike with some linkage.
Okay.
And it led to a pretty horrible bike. That thing, it was like a URT that had a linkage driving the shock. And it didn't last very long, but I think, that had an impact on me, that statement from my boss at the time. And so I went into product design consulting at a consulting company, kind of following university.
Okay. Still Midwest?
No, I had just gone to Wisconsin just for the internship.
Okay.
And I bought a little RV back there, like a Dolphin, and I drove back to Boston in my Dolphin and lived on the street. And so I went into product design consulting and worked on other engineering kind of products, and then later got the opportunity to get work at Santa Cruz and jumped on it. All
right. So you came from out east out here to be with Santa Cruz, and how'd that come up? Let's go back a little bit with the consulting. Was any of that for bike parts, or was it outside bike industry?
No, the most of the work that I did was on doorknobs.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, okay.
For Schlage Lock Company was a big project that I did, and a lot of it was on doorknobs, and then some other consumer products.
Okay. Do you feel like any of that helped you at all with now, or was it just kind of?
Oh yeah, it was great. It actually gave me a real engineering background, and I got a lot of experience in 3D modeling. Worked with a lot of industrial designers, and in consulting was it was a really good gig. I learned a lot. It was like most of my education probably came from my few years in that at Design Continuum was the name of the firm.
Cool. All right. And so did you see an ad for Santa Cruz help? Did you know someone? Like how'd they sucker you out here?
My boss at Design Continuum, we got laid off in the .com bust in 2001. And my boss at the time introduced me to an engineer, Dave Earle, who worked at Santa Cruz at the time, and then I came down and got a contract gig down here.
And what was some of the first stuff you did when you got
Heckler
here?
5.
Which one?
The Heckler 5 was what they called it at the time. The Heckler had kind of gone away and was the Superlight.
Yep.
And then, that was the first mountain bike project that I got, was that one.
Okay. And let's roll down the list of bikes you worked on from there on. Heckler, like what was kind of some of those first bikes you worked on here?
I mean, a lot of the stuff that I worked on at the time, through going through the process, the first ones was like the Heckler, and then the Roadster, and then the VP Free.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Bring it back. People still say bring back the VP Free.
No, they should try and ride one again. I realized they'd never want that back. And then some iterations of the V10. And then right around like after the V10.2, I think, at that point we had a couple of other engineers. Dave Allen had joined on. Dave's with Praxis now. And Dave Earl, and so there was kind of more people contributing into the designs, and so then there was a lot of like shared pieces of the design work.
Okay.
And probably around like 2007 is when Nick Anderson joined the team, and Nick's just like an engineering powerhouse, so he really started doing the bulk of the design work at that point. Okay. And we would work as a team, kind of setting stuff up. He'd do most of the design work, and I'd try and get the stuff made, so that the making of and getting it into market wasn't bogging him down.
Okay, so you would handle kind of from design to production, like that sort of end?
Yeah, or like, kind of make sure that what we were going to make was the right thing.
Okay.
But like probably from once we got into carbon bikes, a lot of the carbon bikes, like from the Nomad, Tallboy, kind of all the way through to the existing Nomad, a lot of that is the lion's share of that's Nick's work.
Okay. Going back a little bit, when did you go from contractor to employee?
January 1st, 2002, I think it was.
Okay, so a long time. We're putting 15 years?
Yeah.
15 and a half. And what, like back then, what were some of the challenges of designing bikes? Because it almost seemed like genres didn't exist, and you guys were just kind of determining what mountain biking would be like based on your designs, right? And would you do differently with the Heckler? Like, why'd you bring that back? Didn't it go up to 5 inches with that first one?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the first one,
well,
I think
not
was
the very first, but the one that
was 4 inches, and then that kind of became the Superlight.
Right.
And then when it came back, it turned into a 5-inch travel bike.
Yep.
I mean, the first version of it had a weird shock rate because all the air shocks at the time were really small air volume. Mm-hmm. And so it was trying to like counteract the small air volume with a falling rate design. But really in the process, the Fox had come out with the AVA shocks at the time, like the adjustable air volume ones with the sleeve. Yep. And that really resolved it. So things were evolving pretty quickly back then, with air volume on the shocks. And then I remember on the VP Free, it was like an 8-inch travel bike, and there were no all rear hubs were 135 QRs. There's the only thing that existed.
Yep.
And I remember trying to fit like a front derailleur on it and going to a Shimano camp and saying like, you guys make a front derailleur for free ride bikes, and they were laughing about it. And then a couple years later they made a front derailleur for free ride bikes.
Because that was the goal, right? 8-inch travel bike, but you could pedal it. You could get to the top of the hill.
With a triple.
Yeah. On a VP Free. That's so crazy to think about. And so like what made you want to build that bike? It's not like there were a ton of people asking for a bike like that, were they?
No,
like
I mean, I think
03-ish kind of.
Yeah, I mean that was around 03. Yeah, at the time, the biggest travel fork on the market was a 6-inch travel fork. Okay. I mean, during the process of designing that bike, the 888 came out, and the 888 was 8 inches of travel, and it had this crazy axle to crown height. Like it had like an extra inch of axle to crown, I think. So, but of course, you're going to bolt on the biggest fork you can find. So I think the bike was designed around a 6-inch travel fork, and ended up getting a fork that had the height of a 9-inch travel fork. So the bottom bracket height was like 15 and a half inches or something. And it just, I mean, it seemed like we were I mean, the same, like with something like the VP Free, I can't remember exactly how it evolved, but I'm sure at the time it was, Rob pushing for the limit of that. I mean, Rob was always trying to find out, like, what wasn't being done, what could we do, you know? Like, who asked for a Super 8? But that was a Ross Cup.
Okay, and like with the V10, did he want a downhill bike to have 10 inches?
Totally.
Like the same idea?
Yes.
Just a little bit more than everyone else.
If it could have had 11, he would have done it.
He's not here to defend himself, so he can heckle it. So, I mean, what'd you learn from all that? Because it was so new, it seemed like there were super fans of those kinds of bikes and designs, but in hindsight, it's kind of a, whoa, what were we thinking? Like, where did it go?
I mean, I think pushing the boundaries, there's always, some things just, they're not ready for it, right? Like, there weren't shocks for it. There weren't drivetrains for it. Like, there was a 68 millimeter BB shell on that bike when it came out, and there weren't bottom bracket widths to support, chain lines with big tires. And so stuff was kind of hokey. We were like especially when you look back. At the time, I was super stoked on it, but you look back and it's a little bit hokey. But I mean, that's the progression of things. I mean, I think probably if I look back at the carbon bikes we made 5 years ago, I think it's kind of hokey. But they had 26-inch wheels.
Yeah. Right. I remember getting the first carbon Nomad and thinking, like, I'll never need another bike again. Like, this thing's perfect. It's got everything. And here we are now, obviously. But what are some of your favorite bikes from that era then that you designed? Like, let's say kind of pre-carbon, or because the VPP came around when you were here, right? Like, whose idea was it to grab onto that design? Like, I know it was the Outland thing, but you guys started using it. And
the reason I think I got hired was because the VPP patents had been acquired, and then some additional engineering horsepower was needed to design bikes using VPP.
Okay.
So that was something that Rob and Hans Heim had figured out and acquired those patents kind of probably the year before I joined, I think.
Okay. And what were some of the initial challenges back then?
Well, nobody knew how any of it worked. And it's kind of like a somewhat, it's a very sensitive system. And so you change things by a couple of millimeters, or if things aren't quite stiff enough, it has suspension behavior that you might not expect. So everything was new. Mm-hmm. And manufacturing then wasn't the most stable thing either. We were using Sapa in Portland and Kinesis USA also in Portland. Yep. And, they hadn't made many of the things that we were asking for before either. So it's kind of like a little, adventure into the unknown. So all sorts of...
Like, what kind of things? Just the way the bikes were put together? Or?
Yeah, like the way that the rear triangles went, and the bearing bores in the frames that had kind of tight tolerances for the bearing fits. A lot of the things were kind of new, or at least fairly unstable. Anodizing frames was kind of a new thing in that day too. So just that's a variable process. So we were all sort of figuring it out, and there were some amazing successes and some opportunities for learning along the way.
Okay. Are there any things you look back at and are just like, wish you hadn't done, or just wish you'd done it differently, I guess?
Hindsight is easy to wish I'd done a lot of things differently, I suppose. But just kind of accept what it is and try to improve moving forward. Yeah.
Carbon kind of starts rolling into the equation, and you guys seem like you got on it pretty early. Like, I know there've been brands using carbon for forever, but it seems like you guys figured out a pretty dialed carbon frame early on compared to what was out there. What brought that on? Like, how did you see kind of the crystal ball with, like, we've got to go carbon. It's got to be done right, and it's the future.
Yeah, I think we did recognize that carbon was coming. There was carbon bikes out there that existed at the time, but a lot of them were heavier than aluminum ones. I think the Enduro was kind of a big one at the time. I remember they had Specialized had their own triple clamp fork thing, that Enduro.
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe 07-ish time frame. And so we recognized that. We really knew nothing about carbon, and it was fairly terrifying. And so there was a lot of trips to Asia. Met a guy called Rob Jatelis, and Rob had like kind of a trading company / manufacturing outfit in Taiwan called PMG at the time, and Rob introduced us to some manufacturers that were looking for bike customers but weren't really making frames at the time. So we started basically kind of figured out together how to make frames that wouldn't break, and that were strong and light and worked for all of the things, and just kind of went from there. It was the end of 2008, and it was the financial crisis was hitting. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in China. I spent a lot of time in China during those times, and being in China when we had our first layoff in like October of 2008. And I came back, and in December of 2008, we had a second layoff. It was like the economy was really crashing then, and people stopped buying bikes when that happens. And it was really unfortunate. We ended up laying off a few people from the engineering team, and like I think about 22 employees in total at the time. So it was pretty crushing.
Yeah, like how big were you back then? Maybe
I think we were about 80 people. So it was like
quarter of the staff.
A quarter of the staff. Yeah. It was really a pretty dark time. And Nick Anderson and I, we had a coffee, and after that, and we were like, we need to make some rad bikes here. And then in January of 2009, we had been working on it, but the Blur XC came out. It was the first carbon bike we made. Yep. And then in April, we had the Blur LT. And I think in July, we introduced the Tallboy, carbon Tallboy, and then the Nomad following that. And it was really like Nick and I just kind of working together to basically release a bike every 3 or 4 months. And a lot of other companies had gone into kind of lockdown on spending. Yep. And I think it was really, good leadership at the time that was like, let's do the opposite. Let's double down on product development, and let's crank out like rad new carbon bikes.
So you can be there when things pick up again.
Yeah, in 2009 was the company turned a profit, and in 2010 through today, we've just been growing. Kind of was a bit of a resurgent effort from kind of 2009 to today.
Mm-hmm. And like, what did you learn with the first carbon bikes? Like, did you feel like you were ready to put them out at that time, or was it just like, we're going?
No, I think actually it was it ended up being perfect timing. Like the market was ready for like carbon bikes, I think, and I feel like we did a pretty good job making bikes that didn't break. People were afraid of carbon snapping. Yep. It was like, carbon doesn't bend, it catastrophically fails. Sure. I think we did a good job making really, really strong bikes. Like we just overbuilt the hell out of them. We're like, we will never have a bike that snaps in half, was kind of like what we were thinking.
Okay. And how did you do that without them being heavier than aluminum, or at least significantly heavier?
I don't know, good design work.
Your engineering skills?
Yeah, I think we figured it out at the time also with the manufacturer, and we had really a good partnership with a manufacturer and some engineering here. We developed some tests, and we did a lot of benchmarking, and we did a lot of, self-doubt and paranoia that we weren't doing it right. So we just kind of kept pushing. And it ended up, working out in the end.
Okay. What do you feel like people don't understand about the brand or the bike industry, like general consumers on the internet, things like that? Because you used to be on the message boards and you'd fire back at people, right?
I used to, yeah.
Yeah? You slowed that down a little bit?
I just don't have the time for it anymore. I still try and read what's going on, but I don't have a lot of time to kind of weigh it in. People use, even the media, the bike media uses the term the industry all the time as if it's like some block of people that are controlling things. And for the most part, the bike industry is made up of a bunch of people who are stoked on bikes, and there's not a lot of dubious decision making. And I think in general it can be kind of tiresome, like the changing dimensions and standards of things, and in some cases unnecessary and not well thought through. But I think the majority of cases, like if you ride a bike that's 10 years old to today, they're considerably better.
Yep.
So I mean, there is marked improvement. We've got a very highly evolved product. Bikes, the gains are incremental. So these little things that can be a little annoying because they're not backwards compatible, in a lot of cases there is improvements along with them.
Yeah. What do you feel like was unnecessary in the last 5-7 years?
And press fit BBs.
And why was that done?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I can't. I think some people have reasons for why they've developed them, but it was something that we never understood a benefit from that we couldn't achieve from a threaded BB, which we thought was lower maintenance, and so we stuck with it. Credit really goes to like Josh Kistner, our product manager, because he just stuck by it. Like, we don't need to do it, even when it seemed like everybody was asking for it. And now it became like a feature on our frames a few years ago when people were sick of press fit BBs, and it's good to see people coming back around to it.
Yep. And I know a couple of your bikes can handle like 27.5 plus, but it seems like you've sort of steered away from that whole fad, at least being like major pushers of that size. Was that intentional? Did you think it would come around to kind of just, those are a little too big and bulky for most riding and too squirmy, so we're just going to stick to our guns? Like, I understand that the 29ers can handle 25 plus or 27.5 plus, but I don't know, it doesn't seem like you really got on that bandwagon that hard.
I think our philosophy is not to tell people what they should or shouldn't ride, or what they can or can't have fun on. We want to make the best mountain bike for everyone. So if you like riding those tires, or that's the terrain that works for you, then we'll make bikes that are in that space. I think we're not of the trying to make a market or tell people what to do or make a new fad by being in front of it. If there's people that are having fun on their bikes, then we'll make some bikes that they can have fun on.
Is there anything you've avoided on purpose just because you thought it wasn't worth doing besides press fit? Like any kind of trends or anything? Like, did the 27.5-inch wheel thing catch you off guard? It seems like you guys are lean enough to move and kind of get stuff done, but...
Yeah, we saw it coming, like we heard about it, and we evaluated it and kind of made an honest evaluation when we were developing the Bronson. Really, what we were calling was the Blur LT. And 27.5 was a thing, and we just made a 27.5 version mule and a 26-inch version mule, and Josh and I rode both of them kind of back to back. And then we came back and said, let's just make the 27.5 version because it seems like that's what people want to try out. And at the time, because the 29s had come, and then people were talking about changing wheel sizes, and there was this kind of like 26 for life thing. And we just try not to be dogmatic about it and just make what people want to ride bikes with. Mm-hmm. And it ended up, it's a great bike, and it wasn't us trying to rush to market or be in front of a trend or anything. It's really just paying attention to what people want to ride. I mean, bikes are fun, and they're like fun toys.
Yeah.
And so.
And where do you get the information that we think this is what people are going to want to ride? Like, that seems like the hardest thing to do for a bike brand, is to determine what style kind of bike to make while still being cutting edge, Like, how do you know, how did you get the information that you thought people would be into 27.5? Was it like message boards? Was it talking to friends, other, people in different countries? Like,
there's a little all of the above. I mean, everybody here rides bikes, and we have the company in Santa Cruz, which is like a mecca for riding. And so there's a lot of people around here who ride, and all of my friends ride, and probably all of the friends of everybody who work here rides, and we know a lot of people who ride bikes. So it's just you kind of absorb it by osmosis,
like word of mouth kind of thing. It pulls in from everywhere, and you've got your close crew that knows what's up enough.
Yeah, and then you just say, hey, let's take a look at that, and if it's cool, then we'll make one.
Okay.
Like with the Plus stuff, we thought we weren't really sure, but we were like, hey, we can make it work on the Hightower. And so let's make it work. And then people who want to choose it can. And there was a bunch of people who liked having the option. And for a lot of customers, they weren't really sure if they'd heard about Plus, but they weren't sure if it was going to be a thing or not. So people like having the option. And you buy a bike that you can try a different wheel size out and experiment with this kind of new tire size and wheel size. So that's I think that was part of the success, that people then had a bike that felt like you could do even more experimenting with your one bike. Sometimes it's hard to choose which bike to get.
Yeah, for sure. What do you feel is the hardest thing in designing and making a bike in terms of pleasing everyone? Like, how do you please pro racers and Joe off the street, like Joe Graney?
Well, we make a lot of bikes. I think that's why we make so many bikes.
Okay.
Is it we don't have to decide which one. We just make another one.
Okay.
And we have a lot of different bikes because it doesn't have to be dogmatic that we have 3 bike platforms and we have to convince people that you choose one of these things or you choose one wheel size. And we just make both wheel sizes. Why not?
Yeah. What's the, as much as you can speak to it, what's the most successful bike out of the lineup?
We have a lot of different popular bikes. Like usually when something gets redesigned, it gets reinvigorated and people are pretty stoked on it, because right then it's like the what we call the BBE, like best bike ever. Like right now, Nomad is the best bike ever, yeah. and the Hightower LT is super popular. I mean, Hightower is definitely up there right now because it was a really popular bike last year and this year as well. I mean, as far as like lifetime achievement awards, the Nomad has to be up there. Yeah. As far as, I mean, the Nomad's got a lot of followers out there.
Yeah. Is the new one too much bike for a lot of people?
Most people think that, and then you go ride it and it feels a lot livelier than you will think that it would.
Yeah.
I guess it all depends on what too much bike is. If you don't ride fast enough to take advantage of it, then, it might smooth out your trails more than you want. It kind of depends on your riding style. It's a bike that really enjoys going fast.
I mean, will there be people that ride that bike when they could be on a solo or something? I'm still going to call it a solo, by the way.
I always call it a solo.
Good.
Yeah. Sorry, repeat the question.
Will there be people on a Nomad that could probably be on a solo? Like, I understand it's up to the person to decide what they want to ride, but
yeah, I mean, for sure, you could people on Nomads who could be on a hardtail, but if you want to ride a Nomad, then that's cool.
Does it ever backfire though? They're like, oh, I don't like this bike because they're not honest with what they're actually riding.
I mean, possibly, but I guess that's up to the individual. If like there's people who drive around with jacked up trucks who never take them off road.
Yeah.
I mean, you're from SoCal. You have plenty of that.
I've seen a couple. Yeah, a desert racer, and you live by the beach. Cool.
But if that's what makes you happy and that's your gig, then so be it. Like, why detract from anybody who wants to do shuttle runs on your local trails with a downhill bike, but you're riding it on a single speed hardtail, and you can go just as fast as them. If they're having a good time, so be it.
Yeah. You get more diplomatic in your age here?
Just life's too short to bitch about what bike you're riding.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right, since we're on that topic, I wasn't really going to bring it up, but what's the e-bike future for you guys? And this is understanding that the U.S. seems like a completely isolated market versus the rest of the world. Everyone else but U.S. seems to be embracing it a little bit. U.S. is like, get it out of here. So with that in mind.
Yeah, I think we haven't made any decisions. Like, again, I try not to be dogmatic about bikes, but e-bikes do seem like kind of a pretty big separation. It's almost like a different sport when you try one of the things out. So I don't know. I mean, we've got quite a bit of, most of our market is in North America, and I think that if there's threats to, if the perceived threat of e-bikes to trail access is true, it's something we got to be super careful about.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Euros who love e-bikes, but there also aren't too many trends in mountain biking that have come from Europe to the U.S., so maybe it just ends up staying in Europe.
Like a triple ring or something? Like they're still riding those over
Yeah,
there?
I mean, like, what do they have? Bar remote lockouts, you know?
Yeah, yeah, lots of cables and danglers. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, the jury's out on it. It's not something we're working on, but, you know, never say never.
Yeah. You just gave me the Dime tour, and I hadn't been here since the cannery, which was 4 or 5 years ago. And to see the difference from the cannery, at least what I remember in my head, to what's going on now. I mean, do you ever look back and think about that you were in the prototype shop, like designing stuff on computers, welding up mules, doing all that, to what it is now? For those who haven't been here, it's a super, incredibly efficient process with, right now, a lot of people assembling a lot of bikes. I was blown away at how much stuff was going on. So you ever think about that?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I think all of us look around and are amazed at kind of what we've achieved and what Santa Cruz has become. Like, it's something that we're really incredibly proud of is that we're in Santa Cruz, California, putting bikes together. And there really aren't very many bike factories that you could go and visit. Period. Never mind having them right at the bottom of an incredible trail network, and being able to put bikes together here and make that happen. It does mean that you have to be efficient about it because the costs are higher, but it's possible to do if you focus on it.
Is some of that efficiency because Pond scooped you guys up, or
we always get a lot of questions about, like, is something like, is X, Y, and Z because of Pond? And really, no. It's like, I think it's the opposite. I think we were attractive to Pond because we're rad, and then they're like, you guys are rad. We're not gonna change that.
Yeah. Did you ever think 5 years ago that you'd be CEO?
No,
of the place?
No,
you know,
not
like
in a
that?
million years. Yeah.
You never had a vision for that, or were you hoping like someday I'm going to run the place?
I mean, I think at the time I was really focused on developing bikes, and that was what I was doing and trying to make. Actually, like 5 years ago is when we were moving in here, and so it was also like trying to make a really rad factory, you know, with a lot of the stuff that you see out on the floor today, and so. It wasn't about, you know, being in a certain position. It's really just about making cool bikes and having a cool place to work.
Okay. And back to the carbon thing, you know, you showed me the room where the carbon development's done and you're getting the processes all worked up. And, you know, you mentioned you have a specific carbon factory that only builds your bikes, your wheels. Does everyone know that? I mean, I just kind of thought that there's a handful of factories overseas making carbon parts, and just comes over here. Like, speak to what's going on with.
Yeah, there are a handful of factories overseas that make carbon parts. You can go to one of the factories and they make over 70 different brands inside of that. So name your favorite mountain bike brand, and I can tell you the factory that's in. And I think that's where it's hard to differentiate and create something that's, you know, unique and special when the manufacturing and the technology is shared in a bit of a cesspool with the rest of all other brands. It's possible, but it's more difficult to do that. And so, yeah, about I think in 2011, we invested in our own composites manufacturing facility with some partners over there, and make just our own bikes. So then we can control how they're made, when they're made, who makes them, how people are treated, what hours the place works, and all of that. So they do everything from the composite layup and curing and painting over there. Not too many people know it, I don't think.
Do you not feel like that's an important part of the story? To me, that was pretty interesting to hear. That kind of gave even more clout to the brand, I thought.
Yeah, I think it is an important part of the story. I mean, at the end of the day, your bike should just work, and it behaves amazingly, and that's what we try to strive for, and that's why we did that.
Okay. And
so I hope that the story is simple for people, but if people who like to hear more of kind of where things come from, that's where it comes from.
Okay, and then you've now thrown wheels into the mix, and that's because you have your carbon factory. Like, when I first heard you guys were doing wheels, I just figured you're popped out at some other, it's another carbon rim coming out, but they're not. Speak to the wheels.
Yeah, we make our wheels in a separate factory than the frames.
Okay.
That really was built specifically to make wheels, and was really just founded late last year. And we have one of our company values is that we don't put our name on things that we don't design. And so we don't do open mold stuff. We don't stick our name on some stem out of a Taiwanese catalog, and the same thing goes for rims. And so we thought if we were going to make them, we would only bring them to market if we made them better. And Nick McRae, who's been with us for 3 years, he just did an incredible job developing the rim. He's a really talented engineer, and we just give him carte blanche. But it was never like they have to be done at some certain date. It was like, if you make a better one, we'll bring it to market.
Yeah.
And it was the result was incredible. And what we were saying was when we were coming to market, it was like, are we going to tell people these are the strongest rims on the market? And we could do that, but we're like, everybody says that crap. Yeah. So we just said, we'll do a lifetime warranty. Like, if you break them riding a bike, we'll give you another set. That's it. That's it.
And so far, so good. How did it shake down with Enve? Because I kind of feel like your Santa Cruz partnership with Enve is what helped sort of bring Enve to the mass, to the attention of mountain bikers. Ooh, if Santa Cruz is speccing them, they've got to be all right.
Yeah, I mean, Enve was the relationship with Enve came from Jason Shears, who founded the brand, and Jason and I met over in Asia and at some composites factories, and we hit it off. And Jason's kind of crazy, and so even with sponsoring the Syndicate, he was like, "I'll do that." And that was before we bought anything from them for quite a long time, and then. It's been, I think, really successful for both companies, but it just reached a point where we felt like we'd be able to bring something to the wheel market. We know quite a bit about carbon development as well, and we just felt like if we were able to develop something that was a good product, and we're able to offer it at a lower price as well than what Enve's were, then we would bring that in. And, we still have a great relationship with those guys. They're still offered on a number of our bikes, and they're a Syndicate sponsor as well. Yep. And so, there's no hard feelings. Just it's time to make a change.
Sure. All right. Syndicate squad is dialed. It always has been. How much of the bike development for what you're doing in here comes from, racer and athlete feedback?
From the Syndicate side, most of it's on the V10, and that,
Sure.
A lot of it comes from them, mostly Greg. Greg is, he spends a lot of time scrutinizing his bike. He was here yesterday, and he's always thinking about his bike. And so, like, the last version of the bike, really, a lot of the input came from Greg, and the 29-inch wheel bike is entirely Greg's creation.
Yeah.
It never crossed anybody's minds here until Greg showed up last November and said, I really need this.
Yeah.
This is going to make me win. We're like, oh.
Okay, cool, why not? And you didn't, no issues, like, tires, wheels, like, how'd you get around that stuff? Like,
Oh, totally. We were like, there's all sorts of issues. Like, there aren't forks. And he's like, I'm going up to Fox. And he got Fox to make a fork. And he said, I'm going to go to Enve. I mean, really, Greg led that development of the bike. And the people at Fox, I think if it wasn't Greg Menard showing up and saying, this is what I need, probably not too many people have that kind of gravitas. So when Greg says this is what's going to make it, and then delivers on that as well, that's cool. And there's quite a bit of chatter, as you know, about 29-inch downhill bikes, and whether one's faster than another. And again, it's not something. If we have the greatest of all time showing up and saying, like, hey, I want to even try this thing out, then you give them that thing to try.
Yeah, sure.
Who am I to judge?
It seems like it's working, like it fits him. That seems like the biggest thing. It just fits him,
I mean, people have said that it's the same size bike on the front end as the 27.5 version. It's the same front triangle. The rear end has the ability to make it a longer chainstay length.
Okay.
So if you pay attention to the forums, everybody knows that short chainstays are the raddest thing because you can manual. But actually, Greg's been asking for longer and longer stays for years.
Okay. Just because of speeds he's at?
Yeah, he pays a lot of attention to front and rear wheel weight bias and like feeling balanced on the bike. And I think when he talks about like the first bike that fits him, it's about kind of front to back feeling like he's balanced on the bike, not that it's not a long enough top tube or the reach needs to be longer. And so that's the fit that he's talking about, where he's kind of he feels kind of centered and balanced on the bike more than it being a reach thing.
Okay, interesting. Were you stressed out with Lord coming up and the new bike? Or are you just curious to see what happens?
Yeah, curious to see what happened. I actually went to Lourdes to see the race. And yeah, I mean, all of the guys were all buzzing because of how qualifying went. And then when the top 20 got rained out, it was like to be continued.
Yeah, totally right. I know, drug on to Fort William.
To Fort William, which could not have gone any better.
Yeah.
I mean, that was... Yeah, but certainly nervous, interested to see what would happen.
Yeah.
Racing, anything can happen, as we just saw in Lenzerheide.
Yeah. Production for those ever?
I still TBD. Not a lot of the parts that they're racing on right now are really production level parts.
Yep.
We'll kind of wait and see how it goes. I think we're not sure if this is a racing specific application or if more people would want them. But a lot of the people who buy V10s race, and so kind of it still remains to be seen if people really want to accept 29-inch downhill bikes or if everybody's cobbling together what they have left over in their garage for next season.
Okay, and so kind of switching to enduro, you guys have your fun and kind of flashy enduro riders, but it doesn't seem like you've ever tried to get the, what's kind of syndicate level enduro team going on. Is that conscious in terms of results?
I mean, I don't think there's not that much consistency in the top 10 at EWS level. So it's not a conscious let's not chase after that, but I think that's a more difficult thing as EWS has evolved. 3-4 years ago, a lot of people said EWS is where retired downhill racers went to die.
Yeah, right.
But really, it's a younger podium than it is in downhill right now.
Yeah.
So that really wasn't true. So that's kind of how dynamic that sport is there. Not purposeful. I mean, we also like Mark and Iago are, and now Josh Lewis. And you look at Ratty. Ratty's been showing up at some of the EWSs. I mean, It's not like we think that those guys are kicking ass, and like there's not too much consistency inside of the top 10 that you'd say like that's a definite podium level contender. Yep. I think some brands have done really well inside of that space, but I think luck has as much to do with it as choice.
Yeah, what do you think about the sport in general? Because mechanicals and kind of luck and things like that, it's such a like downhill, you're one and done. It's super exciting, and there it is. Like, how do you feel about enduro racing like that? I guess from a spectator perspective.
Yeah, it's not. I think it's not quite as exciting from a spectator perspective right now, and maybe as technology evolves, where you can follow like an EWS event, like you'd follow World Rally, that you can really see the different stages and the progression over the event. Yep. It's a longer event and it's more spread out, so it's more difficult from a spectator perspective without the money to follow it like you'd see if it was in the Olympics or something. But otherwise, I love the fact that it's kind of an equipment challenge and it adds that excitement factor to it.
Yeah, does that kind of factor into what you're building? Like, can what we make sustain an Enduro World Series event or a season? Or is it still just you're building bikes for...
I mean, if you can... I think there's plenty of just guys who pound their bikes endlessly day after day, weekend after weekend, and don't have a pit to maintain it, that probably do more damage than a weekend of EWS racing. So we figure if it can stand up to some meatheads, then the racers will be fine. Okay. But enduro is cool because it's a participatory sport. There's a lot of people that can go out and pin it, and it's like an event for the weekend, and it gets people out and riding their bikes and pushing their limits. And that's, I think, one of the valuable parts of enduro, that it gets more people out there kind of for the weekend. And we look at the pros and the top guys, but there's like another 100 or 200 people that have raced that same weekend too that are just kind of out for the fun of it.
Yeah, cool. A little bit back to carbon. You guys buy competitor frames and cut them open, right? That's what I've heard.
We've done that, yeah.
What's the weirdest thing you've seen inside?
There's some Chinese newspapers in one that I used to laugh about. But yeah, I mean, you see different levels of quality and, people's deep, dark secrets hidden away inside of there. But, I don't like to tell tales.
Come on, fire off specific brands and models. Totally kidding. What's good about mountain biking right now?
I mean, it's like I feel like it's a golden age of the sport, right? I mean, mountain biking's bigger than road biking in the U.S. You see the amount of advocacy organizations getting support and different places opening up trails and places to ride is incredible. And as the sport matures, all of us are getting older. You got a kid now.
Yeah, two.
I got kids, and seeing more things coming out to bring kind of the next generation into the sport. Yeah. It's a real maturing of, what 20 years ago was like Mountain Dew and mud splatter.
Ooh, Mountain Dew. The good days. So where are we going to be in 5 to 10 years with what bikes are like? I know you're thinking that far ahead, but are we talking electronics, smart stuff? Are we, because like I said, the first Carbon Nomad, I'm not going to need another bike because it felt so dialed, and that was a triple ring at the time, but I don't know, it was a great bike for the time, obviously, but things have changed a lot. Like, where are we going to be in 5 years from now?
Mountain biking is one of the times in my life that I'm not fucking with my phone. And I hope that doesn't change.
Yeah.
I hope that in 5 years that's still true.
Okay. So no Strava, no computers, or you mess with it at the start and just leave it in your pocket? Or
I think, because for some people, riding bikes is a bit of a religious experience, and you kind of come back and you come back from a ride and you just feel good. You feel relaxed, like you got some adrenaline out there, and I think some of that these days is the disconnection from technology, aka fucking with your phone.
Yeah.
And I think that if there's a rush to like connect a phone or have to screw with it every time you stop, or it's like mounted on your handlebars and you don't get away from it, I think that can really distract from, really what's probably a very healthy space mentally for you. And that's one of the things that's encouraging about seeing more kids getting into cycling, into mountain biking, is I feel like that is something that, young people will probably need as the technology becomes a pervasive part of life. And, maybe our brains aren't quite ready for that.
Interesting. Is Joe's Corner going to return anytime soon?
Maybe, if I ever get enough time to write about it. I don't really have the
You're the boss, you
engineering
can make
side.
time.
Well, I think it, maybe it needs to be, I'd love to see some engineering, some more engineering talk kind of coming out from the guys here, because they're doing incredible work.
Yeah. Like, what would they talk about right now?
What you just saw in the Carbon Lab happening is pretty exciting stuff, and there's some next level work going on there.
Yeah. Is that as accessible as just being able to go into a bike shop and, analyze a design and talk about leverage rates and anti-squat and all that? Like the stuff we were looking at is high level, like I said, rocket science. Like when we were walking around, like it's not just welding up mules, it's rocket science. Like, are people going to understand that as much?
I don't think people are really interested in it, and it's very interesting work that's happening. And I think if we were, and when we're able to share it with people, I'm sure that there were plenty of bike dorks out there that would be totally into it.
Right. What about suspension? Is it are we there?
I think we're just over talking about it as much, right? Things reach a kind of steady state, and it's accepted and fairly well known, and then you don't need to talk about it as much because people kind of get it. It should be like a given. We don't talk too much about wheel size or certain things that we used to talk about a lot when they were kind of newer or not as understood, or there were rapid changes happening or improvements happening, so you talk about them quite a bit. So with some things it's just like with suspension, it's fairly well understood by people, and you probably just need to talk about it a little bit less.
Okay. Where are you going right after this?
I'm going to Downieville.
Yeah, tell me about some Downieville love. I heard you love it up there.
I do. Anybody who goes there, it's hard to not love it.
What's so special about it? Especially being a Bostonian, you fall in love with kind of rugged, dry, Western Sierra.
Yeah, it's big country up there, and it's rugged. If you're not careful, it's a long walk out. And it's just such beautiful country. And one of the coolest things about Downieville, kind of going back to phone stuff, is there's no cell service. There's not too many places that I would go and spend a week without cell service, and that's one of them. You see people who go up there, and kind of after a couple of days, your shoulders roll back a little bit, and you just kind of relax. You just check out, and it's kind of like the way things used to be in a lot of ways. It's like a small town Americana, and all the locals, whether they're grumpy about bikes or not, are all cruising around. It's one bar and amazing riding. And just, it's really like a true mountain biking town. It's really cool. It's like being part of the tribe, being up there.
Sweet. We say we end with that. It's a nice feel good, let go of the phone. If you're listening, you can turn this off and detach, unplug. Thanks. I appreciate it. I feel like we could talk for like 2 hours, but you're a pretty important dude. You've got some meetings to go to.
People don't want to listen for that long. Sure.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Real quick. Talk about the difference. You mentioned it between old timers here who knew you back when and the new crew. You're the CEO, so
Oh yeah, well you were saying that around here, and
That
there's
was
plenty
hilarious.
of people that have been here that it's not the. I'll get some good salty comments, like we just run into John Heiliger back in the machine shop, and I think John's most famous saying is "Fuck you, Joe Graney," which he has no problem saying. But I've known him since I was 14 years old, so.
Yeah.
He's entitled.
Awesome. Cool. All right.
Thanks for coming, man.
Dude, thank you. Appreciate it very
been a good
much.
time.
And yeah, stoked on what you guys are doing. Half the people I talk to, the industry's in a slump, mountain biking's in a slump. It does not seem like you guys are in a slump. Would you agree with that general kind of barometer of what's happening with mountain biking?
I think they're right that the industry is, as far as wholesale sales overall is down if you pay attention to the stats. I think there's some transformation going on inside of the bike industry in the way people do business, the way that, there's different channels to buy bikes. And, but it's not impacting our business currently.
Okay.
You saw how busy it is.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Direct to consumer ever? I know you're not going to say yes or no, but
Well, I mean, who knows? But, we find like the bike shop's a pretty vital part of the community, and we're not in the business of being retailers. Like if you work in a bike shop, it's a really different business than what we do.
Yeah.
And it's something that might not get a whole lot of respect, but bike shops are like the hub of riding in a town. So if they go away, where are you going to go get, a cable or a spare part or something like that? I think it's, kind of the rush to do this. I saw this morning Jeff Bezos is now the richest man on earth. And I'm not sure if, Amazon needs any more cash right now.
yeah,
So,
for sure.
go into your local bike shop and give those guys a high five.
That's an ender right there. Boom. Sick. Thank you. Thank you. I'll talk about RVing. Like you said, you lived in a camper in college?
Yeah, for a couple of years.
All right, get back close. We're not done. He lived in a camper in college because if you don't know, Joe has this, if you've been to Sea Otter, Outdoor Demo, whatever, he has this epic bus. Is it a Bluebird? Is that what kind of bus it is?
No, Bluebird's a school bus, man. This
Yeah,
is a GMC passenger coach, Union Pacific
All right,
PDA 4101. Come on.
So was the first, did the RV in college spawn the big red bus? Do you have a nickname for it?
Some people call it Crazy Train because it's like painted like a locomotive.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been a little fascinated with boats that you could live inside, although I've never done that, but it's always been like something cool.
So like what Rat did, you were psyched on that?
Oh yeah, that's amazing. I'd love to go check out his canal boat, go on a tour. But yeah, so I lived in a little camper for a couple of years because I was always moving apartments, and it's a really cool lifestyle actually. At the time, it's cold in Boston in the winter. But,
I bet. So you just not have a ton of stuff? Like it's just all...
it was all inside.
Yeah.
And so then if you got a week off, you just I would just drive to Colorado. You don't need to pack. Everything's there, man.
Yeah.
You just go. So it was amazing. And when I moved to San Francisco, there was a lot of people living in RVs. And that was a new thing for me because I was the only one in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I'd go park along the Charles River in front of MIT and have like a Boston skyline view and priceless real estate. And nobody would say anything about
Like
me.
you're some hobo on the corner.
Yeah. And it just it was so odd. And I think now and around here with the price of housing, a lot of people are living in cars. So I don't envy somebody who doesn't choose to live that lifestyle, but RV living is good times for a mountain biker.
Yeah. And so when did Crazy Train, when did you get that? It was a long project, right, to get it rolling?
Yeah, like 2000. It's an endless project is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to leave here and go over and put the batteries in and fire it up to move it around. Yeah, I think I got it in like 2003 or something like that. And I was going to go live in it, actually, because I was trying to buy a house around here and I couldn't afford anything. And so I ended up buying the bus. And then I lived in the bus in my driveway for a while, actually. Like I bought a house, but I had to rent out both bedrooms in the house
To pay for it?
Yeah. And live in the driveway. That's
awesome.
Santa Cruz real estate,
is.
man.
All right, now that's the ending. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Bye.
So much stuff. Like, you better not say anything else because we'll be like, oh, wait, what about this? Thanks for tuning in to Vital MTB's The Inside Line podcast. Episodes drop every other Wednesday. Thanks to Jensen USA and Maxxis Tires for the support. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Vital MTB.